Welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack, where tonight the Utah Jazz hosted the OKC Thunder in the Delta Center. Let's talk about it and also discuss whether or not the Utah Jazz possibly make the play-in this postseason. Let's talk about it.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So the Jazz got off to one heck of a hot start tonight in the Delta Center in that first quarter against OKC. OKC allowed them to get a lot of open threes, and the Jazz made them. And that first quarter, they were all over the place. I believe the first quarter is 44 points. So that may be the most that OKC has allowed in any quarter this season, considering that OKC is playing the best defense in terms of points per game scored in the entire NBA. So that was a fantastic first quarter, and they got off to a really hot start. But as OKC is known to do, and what has been the kind of the mantra for that team throughout this early season is it's a really good second half team, defensively especially, and they really tightened the screws in that second half, and they did so tonight. And those threes didn't come as easily as they did in that first half, especially that first quarter. So tides turned, and that's kind of to be expected. OKC is a good closer. The Jazz are really the young team trying to find their way. So that was tonight's game. I thought the Jazz had an opportunity to make tonight's game competitive, which they certainly did in that first half, having a lead at halftime. But it just didn't work out in their favor in the second half. So they need to take what they can from that first half, look what they didn't do too well in the second half, and then move forward, not dwell too much on the loss tonight. That's the important thing. But the other thing we need to discuss is right now, the Jazz have the 10th worst record in the NBA. And right now, if it were to end today, the Jazz would be in the play-in in the Western Conference. And that means that they would not have a draft pick this summer. Now, would that be good or bad for the Utah Jazz? It would be really good from an experience standpoint for the young guys on the team to have some postseason experience. Whether or not they make it into the actual playoffs and get out of that play-in, that's to be debated. But I'm saying even if they don't get out of that play-in, if they get in that play-in, is it really good experience for those young players? And I say it absolutely is. And it would give Lowry his first postseason berth of any type in his NBA career. But on the flip side of that, the Jazz only have the one potential first-round pick this coming draft, and that is their own pick, unless it conveys to OKC if it falls out of that top 8. So from that standpoint, could the Jazz afford to not have a first-round pick this postseason? And in my opinion, if they were to make that play-in, they would have to find some way, any way possible, to trade in somehow to the draft this summer. So that's what they would be faced. They can't go this upcoming draft without a first-round pick. They can't do that. They can't afford to do that in the growth process and the building process of this team. They cannot go through this draft without a first-round pick. So they would have to trade in somehow. So it's kind of a balancing act for not only both Ainges, Will Hardy, and the franchise with trying to get the young guys experience, meaningful experience, but you balance that with, well, can we really afford to forfeit our pick to OKC and then force some way to trade back into the draft, which they would absolutely be forced to do. So that's what the franchise itself needs to look at right now. What is best going forward? And they don't have to worry a ton about it right now. It's not really, until we get more games into the season and see how this plays out. But as of today, they are in the play-in in the Western Conference, and those teams below them, many of those teams are not going to challenge the Jazz for record, quite frankly, unless the Jazz purposely tank. Because some of those teams below them, even in the Western Conference, are just, quite frankly, I mean, they are really struggling. Really struggling. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next, couple of months. We need to kind of balance things to see where the team is, because they might decide that they need to slow things up a bit in order to not lose that draft pick. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're dead, and I think their way to slowing things up, let's face it, it may be a trade. And that may be the rationale, because what we heard from Ainge, the new Ainge, the younger Ainge, is that he wasn't going to lose on purpose. Ryan Smith said that as well. We're not going to pull players out of the lineup. So if you're going to do that, the only way to avoid playing Lowry and some of the other better players is to not have them on the team, right? That's one of the ways. So that may be something that they do. Now, you and I have talked about this a lot, and I think a lot of the fans on the message boards have said this as well, and on Twitter and otherwise, is that I looked at Sacramento Kings while you were talking, and Sacramento Kings are a very interesting story because they missed the playoffs 16 straight seasons. 16. So can you imagine a fan of Sacramento where you got to feel terrible, like when they were in that position and they started to get good again before they got bad again like this year. They just wanted to make the playoffs, right? They just wanted to make the play-in because their fans were so hungry to do something rather than just lose. They just wanted to get in. And I think one of the challenges that the Jazz in right now, no, it's not been 16 straight seasons, so it's not as bad. But we started this rebuild 4 years ago. And we had 2 seasons, and we can't change what happened in those 2 seasons, but we had 2 seasons, honestly, kind of like this one, where we were playing, better than expected. We got the 10th pick in one draft and the 9th pick. And then last year, we got the 5th pick. So even though we dropped in the draft, we still got the 5th pick, and we got this guy we are very bullish on. And the whole game is you've got to be worse long enough because you're kind of delaying the inevitable, right? And so I think your point, and I agree with that, is that it would be really exciting this year to be part of the play-in. But the problem is we're trying to get really good, and we kind of had 2 wasted seasons that were very painful for us as fans, to watch. But we didn't get the high picks that we wanted. And we both know this. Even if we would have got high picks, we would have missed on one. That's just the nature of it. You just got to get enough shots on goal that are high that you're going to hit on some of them. And remember, I think you were pretty bullish on Stephen Castle. And he still hasn't proven that he's a consistent shooter in the NBA. But remember that season where we could have, I think we were 9th that season, right? The 9th pick. And they were 4th to get Castle. Maybe it was 3rd. I think it was 4th to get Castle. The amount that it would have taken to go from 9th to 4th was incredible. So even if we're in that range, right, and we don't want to take the pick, the assets that we can get to go from 4th to 8th or 9th is massive. So that's the issue, is I would love to make the play-in. It would be so much fun to be in the playoffs again, but what I want, I think what you want, I think what a lot of fans want, is to truly be competitive, and we've got to have some pain to get there. And I feel like we should have been more painful 3 years ago and 2 years ago, and last year, honestly, is what we should have done.
Yes, I agree. The Jazz cannot lose this draft pick. I mean, I threw out the hypothetical of something that is a real possibility, depending on what the Jazz decide to do, what Will Hardy decides to do, what the Ainges and Ryan Smith force Will Hardy to do. Because, quite frankly, they cannot lose that draft pick. In the place where the Jazz are right now, they can't skip an entire draft. And what would they need to unload to get back into that draft? You know that acquiring first-round draft picks is very pricey. I mean, it takes an established player of some sort to even get into anywhere in the second round typically. So yeah, the Jazz were able to move up a couple of spots this last draft from something to get Walt, but to get from outside the draft to inside the draft, any position in that draft, even at the end of the first round, requires something. So it's playing a very dangerous game to kind of forfeit that pick. And do you know what forfeiting that pick does? That gives OKC 2 lottery picks this upcoming draft, and they would have 4 first-round picks in this coming draft if the Jazz forfeit that pick. 4 first-round picks. So we don't want to do that. That's not good for the league to give OKC another lottery pick, and it's certainly not good for the Jazz. I want the Jazz to be competitive, but I want them to be mindful that we're kind of playing the long game with this, and at this point, we can't just turn it around yet. We haven't reached that point in roster construction where we can just flip the switch and turn it around, because we still need further assets and we still need to build the roster with some primary important pieces. And that's what's still missing to this point, is some primary important pieces. And especially, I don't know if Ace is going to be that number 1 or number 2 guy. I think we really like what we see. He again played another terrific game tonight, made some threes, made some mid-range shots, and he's also getting some of those shots over Chet, which is a big-time feat. But still, we have to get some of those A-list type players. We need more of those guys on the roster, at least one more. And to get that, it gives a whole lot better shot if we keep that draft pick.
I completely agree with that. And the reality is, and some of our other commentators who we hear out there say, look, this person, the stars are going to be the 5th pick, the 4th pick, the 3rd pick. On average, that's absolutely true. There's no question about that. But one of our late picks, we don't know which one. I bet one of our late picks ends up being one of our key players. We just don't know one yet. So we're not pushing aside those players. Like, we're not saying those players are not going to be good players. It's just we're going to have a higher hit rate with the high draft picks. Look, Shea wasn't a high draft pick. Sengun wasn't a high draft pick. Like, there's player after player that are not high draft picks, but we're trying to get enough shots on goal that we don't want to be the Sacramento Kings 16 years of missing it, because we're pretty good and okay and winning 30 games, but we never really get anywhere, and now we're in a rebuild again. So that's like that's the issue. It doesn't mean that we don't like Taylor Hendricks, etc. Like, that's not what we're saying. It's just like, we could love Taylor Hendricks and still take him at 10, but get 3 first-round draft picks from trading from 10 to 4, right? And so that we can't lose this one this year. I mean, it's too important. It's too deep of a draft. And honestly, we need to be in the top 5. I mean, let's face it. And the only way you can assure to be in the top 5 is to be the worst team. But I feel like in this draft, you really want to get in the top 5 and get one of those guys that's in there, this next year. So, but also, like your comment about, we're going to come back to Ace. We could be losing games. And ideally, in the ideal world, we wouldn't be losing games. But we could be losing games and still be really enjoying watching our players develop. Because I really enjoyed Ace Bailey tonight. I mean, let's talk about Ace Bailey for a minute. We heard in all the pre-draft how selfish he was. We watched him play at Rutgers, like gunning from all over the place. In the 3rd quarter of this game, we saw him going down the lane and having shots and passing it out to the wing. I mean, this guy, he's not at all what we thought what we read about him being. We saw him. Who was it that Kevin Love, like, hit a 3-pointer, and this guy's like enthusiasm, like, on the bench. I mean, this kid is like amazing. Now, am I going to know that he's a number 1? Of course not. Like, you and I don't know it. But he showed some skills even this game, like his field goal percentage, his free throw, one of the few plus minuses on the whole team. I mean, he's getting better, and it's something excited to be excited about.
Yeah, and I want the Jazz to continue. I mean, obviously the focus is still defense, but I still want the Jazz to continue to put Ace in good positions to get high quality shots, and not all the time where where he's coming off picks, he can just catch it and he can shoot it. I really want the Jazz to put him in those type of situations, and I still want the Jazz to put Lowry in more of those type of situations too, just not above the 3-point line. I mean, Lowry had a really nice. He came off a pick, he came off a curl, and then he was going towards the basket. He got the pass, and he easily finished right in the paint. And those are the type of things I want both Lowry, that I talked about in the offseason, that the Finnish team does with Lowry, and I want the Jazz to do more with that with Ace too. And because Ace, man, I love watching him shoot the ball, especially in that mid-range game. He's so good at it. He's getting more and more comfortable in those situations. Once again, he's seemed to have finally gotten his legs back underneath him. He's completely shaken the illness, and he's looking better and better and better with each passing game. And that is what we wanted to see, and that's what we were all hoping to see, and it certainly is playing out in that situation. So again,
I could. Yeah, sorry.
So again, not only did Ace have a good night tonight, so on offense, Kyle had some really nice moments tonight as well. And I thought that, overall, he shot 7-11 for the field. He shot the ball really well again. He's looking more and more like the Kyle that we saw in Vegas than the Kyle we saw in the first 10 games of the season or so. So I think his comfort level is improving too. And one of the things that I like about Kyle, we all know his physical kind of limitations that he has on defense. But the one thing about Kyle, and I compared him to Kelly Olynyk the other day, and I think there are still some comparisons there about what he can provide to the team. But the one thing that Kyle does have that Kelly never had is Kyle actually he's a nice guy, but he has a mean streak. When he gets on the court, that dude has a mean streak, and that's a good thing. The Jazz desperately need some of those guys. We saw it with Collier tonight. Collier also has a mean streak. We want those guys. We want guys with a mean streak. I don't care if they get a T here and there. I don't care if they get thrown out of games. I don't care if the opposing players don't like them. That's fine. That's actually what you want. That was like the 80s and 90s basketball where you got on people's skin. How many people like Draymond Green? How many people like Dylan Brooks? There's a lot of guys in the NBA that don't like those guys. And we want that. And Kyle has that. I mean, I've seen it. I saw it in the summer league. I've seen it early in this season. I mean, it's nice to see those guys that play with an edge at times and that just aren't going to back down. They're going to get up into it, and they don't care. They just don't care at times. And that's a great thing.
It's interesting is that you picked up on two plays that are in my top 10 positives of this game. When Kyle went chest to chest with Jalen Williams and he didn't back down, I thought, that's fantastic. Now, I also thought he needs to put on a little bit more muscle, because he puts on a little more muscle, then he's even more intimidating than he is, right? He did some on the offseason, but I wanted to work out with Taylor Hendricks, but that was great. And when Isaiah Collier kept pulling the ball away from, and honestly bowled over a couple of people and got the offensive foul, I was like, that's what we need, right? Because the one thing coming, like, we're trying to focus on the positives of this game. There's also, we're going to hit on some negatives too. I want to bring up one right now. 3 straight years, our defense is atrocious. It's not below average, it's atrocious. And again, tonight it was atrocious. How do we change that? We change the mentality of the team. It comes from the coaching. It comes from the attitude of the players. And as you said, we need more guys like Kyle with that attitude. We need Isaiah Collier with that attitude. You don't back down. I don't care who it is on the other team. It can be Steven Adams. You don't back down. And we saw 2 of our guys tonight do that, and I love that about them. Can they get even better at it? Absolutely. But that's how we become a good defensive team. I mean, teams are intimidated, scared of Oklahoma City. I mean, they shut us down. right? They both got athletes and they got great players, but they also got this toughness about them. And I love that. Like to me, that was like one of the highlights of the game is to watch Kyle go neck to neck with Jalen Williams. And Jalen kind of turned away from Kyle, and then to see Isaiah Collier go at Mitchell. I mean, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's what I think as a fan base, that's what people want to see. They want to see that just inner competitiveness to come out and see it often on the court, because that's how you become great. At times, with the way the Jazz play defense, I don't know if anybody remembers this. So in the 90s, so there was a guy named Paul Westhead. He coached college basketball at Loyola Marymount. At Loyola Marymount, he had these two guys named Bo Kimball and Hank Gathers. They scored a ton of points. They played up and down. They kind of just let the other team score so that they could get the ball faster and get back into transition. And this was the team. Hank Gathers, he had a heart condition. He ended up dying on the court in a Loyola Marymount college basketball team. But so after Paul Westhead did that at Loyola Marymount, he went to the Denver Nuggets. And he tried to employ that same system with the Denver Nuggets. Like Blair Rasmussen, this finesse player, was playing center for him, who shot a bunch of perimeter shots and everything. It was contrary to what the NBA was at that time. But I watched that Denver Nuggets team and how many points they allowed, and they had like some 60-point losses or something like that, something absurd. Like they had games where the other opposing team was scoring like 180 points. But I watched that Denver Nuggets team, those old historical games of that Denver Nuggets team, and sometimes I get the vibes of the Jazz game, the Jazz team, this Jazz team over the last few years, and it's just. At times it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating for everybody else too. They watch it and they go, gosh, we could be more physical. We could be more physical. We can play with more aggressiveness. We can do this, we can do that, rather than playing, this soft matador, everything switching and doing all these switches and getting 7-footers on 6'4" guys in the paint. And I know it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating for everybody at times. But Will Hardy's gone through a bunch of changes since he got with the Jazz. That first year, he tried all these zone defenses and everything. He went through that progression. And David Locke said, well, Will Hardy thinks that you have to be able to play all these different defenses at some point in the NBA. At that time, we knew that none of those players are going to be on the Jazz in the long term that first year, other than possibly Lowry and possibly Walker. Those were the two guys. So Will Hardy went through this thing not for the benefit of the players at that time. He was trying to figure something out for himself and for coaching the Jazz moving forward, something that would work, something innovative that would be different than what the other NBA teams are doing. And unfortunately, none of those zone defenses worked out. So he's kind of moved on. He keeps on going through these progressions of trying different things and seeing if he can get something to work. And quite frankly, I think he's still in that progression, because thus far, he hasn't been able to find anything that's working. And the young guys just aren't picking up, and we're not seeing any more physicality or intensity on defense either. And quite frankly, the Jazz don't have great defensive personnel at the moment. As we've always said, as everybody knows, Walker's gone. He was their one defensive asset that was like a really plus defender, and he's not on the team this year. So it's a lot of trial and error, and I think that people need to be patient with it still and see what comes with it, because there are no easy fixes to this. There's no easy fixes, and we'll see what Will can do with it. Like, obviously, there's an evaluation period after this season that Ryan Smith and the Angels are going to have to go through and see if there's improvement, if they feel there's improvement, if there's improvement in the numbers, if there's improvement of the eye test, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, I'm interested to see what happens the rest of this year. Thoughts?
I am too. I am too, and I agree with that. And I'll say this, is Will's a young coach. He doesn't have the experience of a Popovich. He doesn't have the experience of now Eric Sporer. He doesn't have that, right? So he's trying to develop both his coaching style and his knowledge, frankly. That he came in, I think you expect an NBA coach to know everything. He doesn't, right? He's learning as he goes on. So I have no problem with somebody testing and learning and developing, because he's doing it with a young team. I think that makes a lot of sense. But as you said, eventually you have to have results. And it's now going on 3 years and there haven't been results. So eventually there has to be this evaluation that either the results there or the management has to kind of step back and say, and we're not saying that, okay, Will should get fired. We're not saying that. We're saying there has to be results and there has to be accountability, and that's players, front office, management, et cetera. And we do have to improve defensively. We all know that. I mean, this is not like something we don't know. And you also know that we're weak on personnel and doing defense. But you made this comment the other day, and it's a hypothesis. We can't prove it right or wrong. It's a hypothesis, but I want to emphasize it because I agree with it. That if the coach of Houston, and none of us can pronounce his name, that's why we keep calling him the coach of Houston. I'm not even actually sure how to say his name. But if he were coaching the Jazz, the defense would be much better. And I completely agree with that because he brings this level of just gravitas that his players follow, and they exhibit that too. And that to me is each coach has to have his own style, but at the same time, I think you need to have that kind of mentality as a team. And that's what I feel like we're missing right now.
Yeah, and coaching is absolutely a lot of it. I mean, like that previous example I said with Paul Westhead. Paul Westhead, I don't care what personnel you put on Paul Westhead's team, that team's not going to defend. Just flat out. It doesn't matter who he has on his team. He could have Dylan Brooks. He could have all these current Alex Caruso. He could have Chet. He could have Wemby. His team's still not going to defend. So a lot of it is like coaching style and what you emphasize and how you coach. That's a lot of it. That's a lot of defense. And, it's really up to the coach to initiate that defensive style of play. I mean, the players aren't going to do that on their own. First and foremost, that has to come from the coach. Now, you need the personnel too, but the personnel without the coach that emphasizes that you're not getting anywhere without a coach that actually coaches defense and emphasizes defense and insists on defense, period.
And holds players accountable if they don't do that. Yeah. And the whole thing about play hard and pass and accountability, you apply it universally, not selectively. It has to be applied universally. And that's including to your star, Lauri Markkanen, right? That's including to him. That's the only way to do it, is to have it apply to everybody so that, you can't have a Clarkson exception, right? You can't do that, pointing out a former player. But let me say I crossed off 4 of my things I had on my highlight list. Let me give you a few others. Lauri Markkanen, 9 free throws. Keontae George, 7 free throws. Both of those guys continue to get to the line and exceptional free throw shooting. Keontae's free throw shooting this year has been Steph Curry-like, and we have to give him credit for that. That was great. I'm going to stay on Keontae George. I mentioned in the last game that I was worried. I didn't mention Keontae by name, but I know you know who I was talking about. I was worried because he was hot. He had the 22 shots, and really because you don't get a shot when you get fouled, he had more shots than that, right? He had more than 22, but he got reported 22 shots. Tonight's game, he had 10. So he didn't do what I was fearful he was going to do, where he's saying, I had a good game, so now I'm just going to come in and gun. He stayed within the game plan, and I very much appreciated that. I was very impressed with Keontae's maturity on that, and I give him a lot of credit, and I give the coaching staff credit for that. I thought that was great. And then the final thing, and this is completely unrelated to the game, I'm not a big fan of the NBA Cup. But I got to tell you, I like the Jazz, the trade up of the Jazz court. I think it's really cool. And I don't think anyone else liked the Minnesota court the other day, 2 weeks ago. I thought it was cool. Honestly, some of these courts are kind of wild, but I don't think you need the NBA Cup. And I honestly am not a big fan because then you're having more back-to-backs, which I prefer we have fewer of those. But honestly, I do like the NBA Cup courts, to mix them in. It's kind of like wearing retro uniforms. It adds a new mix. I mean, you're trying to get this little buzz about, the NBA, and I like it. I think it's cool. I wish they'd do away with the NBA Cup, but I think the courts are cool.
Yeah, I think they're. I don't think they're going to abandon this anytime soon. I think they're going to push forward with it and try and make it into a thing moving forward. I mean, this is like what, the 34th year of it. So I think they're going to try and continue to push this forward with the, and maybe they even do some more innovative things with trying to make it more interesting and whatnot. Because I did hear, I believe I heard that they're going to change the All-Star game this year and split it up into 3 teams, 2 American teams and 1 international team, and play a round robin of 12-minute quarters. So if that is the case, I read that, if that actually is the case, I'm super pleased about that. And I actually, for the first time in, quite frankly, basically my adult life, I might tune into that to see if it's better, if the guys take it seriously. Because I, quite frankly, if they are doing that, and I believe they are, I think the international team players might actually take that personally and try and win those games, which could make it interesting. Because if we look at the NBA right now, you could argue that maybe the top 5 players in the MVP balloting right now are all international players. Like Giannis, Jokic, Luka, Alpi, and Shea. Those might be the 5 top MVP, and those guys would be on an all-star team together. That would make it interesting. So I'm happy that the league is looking at these things and trying to make improvements, because we know some of these things definitely needed improvement.
I am too. I'd like to see some improvements there, and I couldn't agree more. Let me throw out now some other observations I had about the game. And some of these are not as positive. One, Cody is getting some time. He was 0 for 4 from the field in this game. Walt got a little bit of time. Honestly, given the amount of time they're having and how Cody is shooting the ball, like from 3, his percentage, I would like to see him go to the G League and just get some more time and comfort. So I know he's now, he's maybe beyond what he should, but the reality is we're trying to get all these players to be able to play in the NBA and get bigger salaries. That's good for them. And if that means going and getting the minutes and getting their confidence and just getting them reps down in the G League, I'd rather do that. So both with Walt and Cody, I would really like to see them go to the G League and see how they do. And honestly, I bet Cody's numbers improve. I bet Walt dominates. Because you had mentioned the one player you like watching Ye shoot. There's 3 players on this team, besides like the Lowry and Sensabaugh. I think watching like Kyle shoot he's got a beautiful shot. I mean, when it swishes in, got great location. I really like watching Walt shoot. So I have no doubt those guys I think are going to be really good shooters, but I'd really like to see those guys go to the G League and get some time. And then the one other thing I was going to say about this game is that the 27 turnovers, again, that's the other thing. We're like talking about defense and how do we improve defense. I'm not a coach, so I don't know how to improve the turnovers, but that's been a consistent thing too. And I don't know. Something has to be done there too, but it just seems to be a recurrent theme, right? And I'm not sure that's because your schemes are too difficult that they're turning it over. Like, I don't really know what the issue is, but there is this issue that just popping up. And I know Hardy is focusing on it, but I just I would like to see that at least like making some marginal improvement. And tonight was a tough night at 27 turnovers.
Yeah, that certainly had a lot to do with again, giving up just an absolutely massive number of points and 140 plus once again. Those 27 turnovers. I mean, they did have 30 assists. So again, they had a ton of assists in this game, and they shot the ball reasonably well from the field at 48.1 and 42.1 from 3. So the shooting wasn't the issue with the Jazz tonight from the offensive standpoint, but the 27 turnovers, that hurts a lot. I mean, it's a recurring theme that we keep on talking about. It's just they continue to struggle with a lot of the same things that they have the past 3 years. So it's just one of those things.
And it doesn't matter the personnel, right? I mean, whoever you're swapping in, it's the same outcome. Same outcome defensively. And so in the Los Angeles game, we commented that the Los Angeles Lakers, what was the percentage Los Angeles Lakers shot in that game?
I think they shot 60% in that game too.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, so
this
2 games
game,
in a row.
61 or
Yeah,
62.
yeah, two games in a row they've shot 60 plus.
An NBA an end game, 60. You're 2 games in a row. You're allowing them to shoot 60%. And by the way, the Thunder shot 60% from three. So that's unusual. I think that's just good. Mainly good shooting, but also that's like that, I'll tell you, that's tough. I mean, like if I were just to ask you, before the game, like, what do you think the opposing team's going to shoot? I bet in your wildest, like you would never say 60%. That's just so 60% in the NBA is so unusual to have that sort of percentage, and we've allowed it now 2 games in a row, and so that clearly was not one of the positives.
Yeah, and they may have that may have been a franchise record for the number of threes made by OKC. I mean, I was watching the OKC feed where Michael Cage is the color guy, and he said that I think he mentioned that was a franchise record. So they made 23 of 37 threes. So that's 69 points in 3-pointers, and that's a crazy number of points for 3-pointers. So, yeah, I mean, it's again, it's a lot of the same. We keep on talking about a lot of the same points, game after game.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to do the Google AI quickly and see if you're right about that. It's 27.
27 franchise record
The Pelicans, yeah.
for Pelicans,
Yeah,
for OKC.
no, against the
Against Pelicans, they made 27.
Yeah, February 2010. Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't the record, but it was certainly a lot, and the percentage they shot was just unreal. And honestly, I am thoroughly impressed with that team. It's not only Shea, and you made this comment, Shea and his free throw shooting. I think we're going to say the same about Keontae. I do think the NBA is going to change what they did a few years ago, where there was too many free throw shots. Like I gave you a stat the other day that the number of free throws are 4 more per game on average than they were over the last 5 years. I mean, it's just gone up. So I think that some of those are going to come down, but still, their personnel is amazing, and they're developing players like Dort and Mitchell, and it's just incredibly impressive. I mean, that team is good, but the nice thing about them is they got a guy like Dort that doesn't have to shoot the ball, right? I mean, you got shooters, but he fits his role. Harkenstein fits his role. I mean, they know what they're supposed to do, and they're okay with that, right? They're not trying to be something that the team doesn't want them to be or who they're not. They're okay filling the role, and you got to give the coach some credit for that. I mean, that's hard to. Like, can you imagine the ego? Because all these guys, if any of us went and played with it, they would just hammer us, like completely school us, score on every play. We could not, and they could stop us. They want to be able to score. I mean, all these guys can score, but they filled our roles. I mean, it is very impressive about this team. Just imagine what they're going to be with Jay Will coming back. Just imagine what they're going to do with, even if they don't get our draft pick next year, they got 3, as you said, and potentially high ones. I mean, it's impressive to watch them.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the keys to building a really elite team is having guys who can put up significantly better numbers, but players that are that good, but they're willing to sacrifice some of their numbers to be a role player. But the key to having those really elite role players is getting guys who could play a bigger role, but are willing to accept a smaller piece of the pie on a really, really good team. And that's, to give the coaching staff and the front office OKC a lot of credit, because that's what they've been able to do. And that's what the Jazz need to shoot for.
Yep, absolutely. But some positives on the game tonight. It was fun, notwithstanding. The first quarter was awesome, right? We blew it up. We won in over 2 quarters. We won. So there was, so that's the positive from this. Just kind of like trying to forget the final score.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens. Up next, Jazz play the Lakers, and this is a home game this time, so let's see what happens with that. I think that, quite frankly, I think it's going to be a lot more competitive in that game in LA. That's what I'm predicting. I don't think this is going to be the Lakers are not going to blow out the Jazz whatsoever. There's going to be a lot more competitive game, but we'll see if I'm right. But anyway, we're going to call tonight. And for those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X at Jazz Smack. And we will talk to everybody later.